All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Stacey Armato, chair of our legislative committee with the South Bay COG. And without further ado, I am going to toss it right over to Jackie Bacharach, our trusted and faithful executive director here at the COG. Jackie.
Thank you. I wanted to, first of all, let you know that there will be handouts and we can send them to you also. We have a legislative matrix, which is which includes all of the legislation we've been monitoring and what the governor finally did with it, whether it's law or whether it did not make it this year. And also we have this program presentation, which I'm going to be doing right now, which is our update. And last time we saw you, next slide, please. Last time we saw you, it was July. So this will be our update from July. And next slide. We're going to cover a couple of subjects that are really important and high priorities on the COG. And I'll just get right started. Next slide, into the fiber network. We do have a functioning fiber network. And I want to just remind you, this is what it looks like if you can see the blue lines. All the city halls are connected with a ring. And so they're each one's connected. And then there are laterals that go off to the city halls. We have not only our cities, but we have Beach Cities Health District, West Basin Municipal Water District, Lundquist Biomed, and 7 sites for the South Bay Workforce Investment Board. So we have the ability to do a lot of, once we get more applications, we could do teleeducation, telehealth, telemedicine, so and telework, excuse me, and also training. So we're very excited about this. And next slide, please. The South Bay Fiber Network is a model. We are for implementing what's called middle mile. We've brought our network to the south, to each of the city halls. And we're getting calls from everywhere. We're doing a lot of briefings for other agencies. We have 37 sites that are billed to the service, and we're working on 3 more sites that have committed. One being the Regional Communications Center, which is a public safety site in Hawthorne, and 1 park and water site in Lomita, so 2 sites in Lomita. We're now working with Redondo Beach and Torrance on their transit centers. They're looking at whether they want to link up their transit centers. That will probably use up most of the money that we have for construction. And as you know, the COG is paying 100% of the construction to get these sites connected for the initial members. We're also working on applications, data centers that might be able to store the data offsite, neighborhood centers for disadvantaged communities to bring our fiber into an access center where people can get it where they don't have good service. And also we're working with other providers to see how we can take the service to businesses and hopefully eventually to residents. Thank you. Next slide. Our local travel network is another unique and exciting project of the COG. If you look at the right-hand side of which is our map, all the green are streets in the South Bay, and the purple lines are what we have actually ridden. We have a staff member who's ridden them in a bicycle, and they will, in the main, connect the South Bay on slow-speed streets, so that people that choose to get rid of a car and use an electric bike, a scooter, and this is something they own, not rentals, a neighborhood electric vehicle, will be able to get around the South Bay in a network of streets that will be signed and will say local travel network, and they will be safer because cars will be warned that these are streets that they'll be sharing with slow speed vehicles. We think it's going to require state legislation, and we'll be talking to our state legislators about an NEV plan, which would allow us to use the words NEV, neighborhood electric vehicles, on our signage. We have a story map that goes through this project, and we hope that you'll take the time to look at it. It's very informative, but we're very excited. We're going to be starting to work with our cities on how we can get this project implemented, and community groups have expressed their interest in it as well. Next slide. Our transportation projects, Metro is very busy at doing a lot of things that affect the South Bay. We're looking at the fareless system and how it affects our municipal operators and what the service recovery issues are. They're looking at congestion fees and express lanes, and we're trying to make sure that they look at the vagaries of, for example, the 405, which has no parallel streets It's one of a freeway that's very, that's actually unique because there isn't a good parallel street you can take on the 405. So that involves alternatives to those that can't afford express lane fees. And then the EIR for the, I have to say Green Line, but it's the C line, is now under development, and we're looking at that. Next slide. I thought this would be interesting to show you. We get money, as you know, from Metro for Measure R and M. Measure R started in 2008, and since that time, we've used our funds. We have 906 million total, and we've used 778.6 million. Those funds terminate in 2039. Measure M started in 2016, and there's no sunset clause on Measure M, and we've given out $211.4 million, and this is to our cities, the county, and we funded some Caltrans projects. We're currently meeting with city staff to kick off our next cycle of R&M. Next slide. On homeless services, we are very, very active and busy. We received we will be receiving $1.95 from the county for what's called innovation funds. Our cities have really engaged, and we received applications for this money for $3.5 million. And we've just finished a very, very difficult process of recommending the projects that you see here for funding that come out to the 1.9 million. And they're pretty much around the region. And I think the number that we've set is, and I should have had this on the slide, we think if we do these projects, we'll be providing about 135 beds. And it is an 18-month project. And we're going to be working with each of these cities and the county to try to leverage funds. There might be more funds we can bring in for a pilot on mental health, which we're working very hard for. We have a brand new homeless services manager, Ronson Chu, and he's really hit the ground running. And if you have questions on homeless, Ronson's a really good resource. We're also very delighted that our own Christian Horvath from Redondo Beach has been named the co-chair of the County Blue Ribbon Commission to improve LAHSA governance, so that we can have a prominent seat at the table on those important issues. Next slide. And then I just wanted to remind you, we have Home Share South Bay, which is a program where we're working with an online home sharing service, Silvernest, to provide services, homes that people can go into. Seniors, for example, that want somebody to share the home with them, or it might be someone who might be in jeopardy of losing their home. We have signed up over 80 housemates and over 17 homeowners. We have one actual match. We're almost ready for 2. It's very hard during COVID, but we're not giving up because we think this program has great promise for those people in the South Bay that are very house rich and would like a companion and maybe someone to help with the expenses. Next slide. Our environmental programs. This year, we're going big on greenhouse gas inventories. We have someone working on updating all of the city's greenhouse gas inventories, and that will allow cities to be able to assess their efforts on how they're doing towards their goals. So we want to make sure that we keep that front and center. Water programs, we are working with all of our water agencies, but specifically with West Basin, they have a program for disadvantaged communities where people can get rebates on high efficiency clothes washers. So we're working to make sure that people know that program is available and helping them access it. We are working with South Bay businesses on water audits for kitchens, and our very, very popular rain barrel giveaways will be starting up again. Next slide. On energy efficiency and waste, we are working with our cities to identify projects with the gas company to install. They come out and directly install efficiency measures at no cost to the agencies. And we also are providing information on food waste. We've become very good at promoting virtual tours and forums and how-to videos. And then I just wanted to mention, if you are not familiar with the fact that we actually have 3 newsletters. We have 2 e-newsletters, our South Bay Environmental Services and South Bay Business Assist Program newsletter. And then we also have our quarterly South Bay Watch, which they're all actually e-newsletters, but the South Bay Watch, you can also get in hard copy. Next slide. And I always mention our General Assembly. It's going to be March 24th this year. And our working title right now is Back to the Future, Imagining the South Bay. And so please watch for more information. We're looking for sponsors right now, and we hope that you'll go right to your calendars and write this down. And then I think the next slide is I wanted to let you know we have a brand new website. All the information I just gave you should be hopefully easily found on our new website. And we hope you'll check it out and send us your feedback. And thank you very much. That's our South Bay update. And happy holidays to all of you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you again, all of you, for being here. And thank you, Jackie, for giving us an update on all the good work that the South Bay COG is doing each and every day. We're going to move along on the agenda here. And we are lucky enough to have two of our esteemed Congress members with us today, Congressmember Ted Lieu and Congressmember Maxine Waters. We have a limited schedule here, but I know you both have a wealth of information to offer us. If we could take about 5 minutes each for each of your updates, that would be great. I tend to go ladies first. So Congressmember Waters, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Am I unmuted now?
We can hear you.
Thank you. Let me just say good morning to everyone, and I'm very pleased to join you today. I would like to begin by thanking you for inviting me to speak, and a personal thank you to Sydney Amato for the introduction. I would also like to thank my dear friend Jackie Baccarat, Executive Director for the South Bay Cities Council of Governments, for our excellent leadership. And I want to thank all of you for your efforts to address housing and homelessness, which are critical issues here in the South Bay. Let me just try and take this 5 minutes that you have allotted to me and try and hit a few important points. First of all, let me just say that I am so proud of the work that we have done in response to the pandemic. The fact that we have the CARES Act, we have the American Response Act, that are the two major funding efforts where we were able to ensure that people were able to put food on the table with $1,400 in a stimulus package that we put together, the assistance that we did for those who were receiving unemployment, even though those amounts may have been meager. We added at one point $600 to that. And so we did an excellent job in supporting our small businesses with the PPP program. And of course, our president ensured that we put more money into PPE in addition to PPP. PPE is the equipment that was needed for all of our frontline workers. At one point in time, as he came into office, there were complaints from our nurses and our doctors and our nursing homes, et cetera, that they didn't have the gowns and the equipment that they needed in order to do their job. But we have done an excellent job of making sure that our frontline workers now have everything that they need. And our small businesses are very pleased. They were a little bit worried in the beginning when the big banks, for example, created their own portals and took care of their concierge clients. But because I and Ms. Velasquez from New York serve on the Financial Services Committee, and I'm the chair of it, we were able to come back after that money was basically utilized by the big banks and put another huge amount in for the small businesses. And so what we did was, with an extra about $60 billion, we were able to fund not only the MDIs and the CDFIs, that's the Minority Depository Institutions and the Community Development Financial Institutions, but also our credit unions and our community banks. And they have done a great job of getting that money out. And because of them, many small businesses that would have closed did not. They were able to stay open. And so I'm very pleased and proud that we've been able to do that. But as you know, there were several big issues that we've been dealing with. I think we solved one just yesterday when we all had to get back to Washington, D.C. to vote to increase the debt limits. And that's very important. If we had not done that, it would be a catastrophe. We would not be able to pay our bills. And of course, we would be absolutely downgraded in terms of our credit rating, on and on and on. But we've been able to get that done, working with the Senate now, at least until December. And then we have to pay special attention to continue to raise the debt limits so that we can pay all of our bills. And I'm very pleased again about the work that we've been able to do in responding to this pandemic. But let me just say, in the reconciliation bill, the big bill that you hear so much about, where you have everything from childcare, early childhood education, expansion of medical assistance, where we have education that's funded in ways that would reduce costs for our community colleges, on and on and on. In that, I have $327 billion for housing. That includes housing across the entire spectrum. What I do is I have money in there to ensure that public housing that's been in such disrepair is funded. I also have money for Section 8 vouchers. Many people who've been waiting for years to get a Section 8 voucher to subsidize their ability to pay the rent would be taken care of if we pass this bill. In addition to that, we have the Housing Trust Fund. That is a national trust fund that I worked with to create when Barty Frank was chair of this committee. And that would go to the developers who are willing to and know how to develop low-income housing. And that's a problem in this country. We don't have enough affordable housing. The rents are extraordinarily high. And when you live in places like California, New York, and New Jersey, many people are paying over 50% of their income for rent. And so I am attempting to deal this in a comprehensive way. I even have in this bill some money for first generation and maybe millennials to deal with down payment. Many of them work every day. They're in the gig economy and they have 2 jobs, oftentimes 3 jobs. They can pay the mortgages, but they just can't get enough money to pay for that down payment. So I have some down payment assistance in this bill for them. For those who are worried about what's happening with the cities, we have additional money for Cdbg, the Community Development Block Grant, which the cities love so much, and they have flexibility to use that in helping to develop housing and support housing. And we have something called the Home Program. Torrance is a beneficiary of Cdbg, of the Home Program, in addition to all of the other attempts that I'm making to ensure that this country gets to do what it needs to do in order to help provide safe, secure housing. I want to thank you in Torrance for the program that you have where you encourage people to be able to rent out a room to those who cannot afford to rent a whole apartment, et cetera, et cetera. And so in the minutes that I have, I just wanted to point to that. And don't forget, we have the big infrastructure bill. So between the reconciliation bill and the infrastructure bill, these bills will be great in dealing with our economy and helping to stimulate jobs and contracts. And so there's been some discussion, as you know, about which of these bills would go first. And so we've got to get beyond some of the discussions that we're having, where everybody wants their way, and get to a point where we can get together and we can pass the infrastructure bill so that we can, do what is needed to, repair our highways and all of the infrastructure, including the water systems and the bridges that are falling apart. That's very important. That's a $1 trillion bill. And so I know that these numbers sound big, but it's all being paid for because we have so many entities at the high end, very wealthy corporations who pay 0 in taxes. And so we're going to make sure that we close those loopholes so that everybody's paying their fair share. And with that 1% maybe who does not pay any taxes at all, this is what's going to underwrite the cost of what we need to do for housing and infrastructure. So with that, I'll wrap it up because I know that you have a plan here and you want everybody to stay online with this. And so let me just say for my district, the 43rd Congressional District, I am working very hard for all of the cities in my district to ensure that in addition to having these big bills passed that I'm supporting, we also have some other efforts where we can direct a smaller amount for various things. And I know that Torrance has always been interested in doing whatever it could in transportation. And so I won't go into all of the details for all of the different cities that we're trying to deal with in smaller amounts. But I want to thank you for allowing me to have this time in order to share with you what's going on in Washington, D.C. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Congressmember Waters. We have Q&A right after this, but I'm going to toss it right over to Congressmember Liu for his update.
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Jackie, for your leadership and for all their participation today by the local elected officials. So thank you for your public service. It's an honor to serve in Congress with Congresswoman Maxine Waters. She has done a fabulous job as chair of financial services, and you just heard from her all the amazing provisions that she's been able to put into the Build Back Better reconciliation bill. As all of you recall, earlier this year, we passed the American Rescue Plan. That transformative bill had four main goals. It was to get kids back into schools, to get shots into arms, to get people back into jobs, and to get cash into pockets. It's largely accomplished those goals. 96% of schools are open for full-time in-person instruction. We created about 5 million jobs since January 20th. Vaccinations continue to increase every single day. And with stimulus checks, as well as the tax credit for families with children, we are making sure that Americans get the assistance that they need. In fact, this Friday, about 90% of families with children are going to get another round of cash deposited directly into their bank accounts. And this tax credit for families with children has not only cut poverty for children in half, it's also freed up folks to enter the workforce. But we did lose a lot of jobs during the pandemic. That's why we have these two large bills, infrastructure bill, as well as the Build Back Better reconciliation bill that we're working on. And it's my belief we'll get them to the president's desk either sometime in October or in November. The infrastructure bill, in addition to making sure we rebuild our highways, roads, and bridges, also has money in there for broadband infrastructure to put broadband everywhere. And it is something that we do need and we're going to get done. In terms of the Build Back Better bill, in addition to what Chairman Waters mentioned, I also do want to note that we're trying to work on the SALT repeal to make sure that we can eliminate the cap on the state and local income tax deductions that Republicans put in that really hurt states like California and New York and New Jersey. Negotiations are ongoing, so we'll see what happens there. I also note that the Build Back Better legislation right now has a provision to ban offshore oil drilling. As all of you know, that leak from the platform near Long Beach has flowed down and really messed up Huntington Beach and Newport Beach. And it wasn't that long ago that in 2015, a large oil spill off the coast of Santa Barbara came down and started to mess up Hermosa Beach, Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach, and Torrance Beach by sending tar balls onto our beaches. So my view is we need to absolutely ban offshore oil drilling. I'm also co-author of the West Coast Ocean Protection Act, introduced by Senator Feinstein and Congressman Jared Huffman, that would also ban offshore oil drilling. And I'm working right now on additional legislation that would lift caps on penalties that are currently in place for these oil companies when there is an oil spill in the waters. In addition, I also do want to note that on homelessness, Chairman Waters has done an incredible job, and want to just give a brief update on the West LA VA. There is a homelessness encampment near the West LA VA, and some folks may wonder, well, how come it's there? Well, it turns out that people under law have essentially a right to have these encampments, and you can offer them housing, and if they don't want to leave, they do have certain rights. So most of the folks in the encampment have been offered housing repeatedly. We can house every single one of those folks. They just choose not to leave. they get more freedom when they're in those encampments. There's a community there, and there's all these other reasons why they don't want to follow certain rules if they get housing. However, the county has set a date of clearing out that encampment in early November, and people are starting to move now. It went from a high of, I think, nearly 50 tents now to about 34. And people, I think, realize that when you offer them housing, it's essentially going to give them a better situation, and they're slowly leaving the encampment. So hopefully by early November, that encampment will go away. And in terms of the federal jurisdiction, we have jurisdiction over veterans who are homeless. There's a HUD voucher that has been quite effective, and we have been housing homeless veterans for years. If you look at a spike in homelessness, it has not been among homeless veterans. It's been among pretty much the entire population except for veterans. In addition, the West LA master plan is proceeding as planned. One of the first bills that got signed in Congress set up a whole new master plan for West LA VA that at its full build out will have over 1,500 units to house homeless veterans. And that jurisdiction serves the entire South Bay as well. We have buildings that have been retrofitted, buildings that are opening up, and it's continuing to go on pace. And we look forward to having the West LA VA continue to build out those facilities. So with that, happy to answer any questions you may have. And it's an honor to represent many of the cities that are here today.
Thank you, Congressmember Liu, for your update. We appreciate it. We appreciate both of your leadership during these difficult times. I'm going to hop right over to Q&A. We had solicited our city council members and mayors, city managers and staff for questions of interest for you both. And I think I'm going to kick it over to the former South Bay COG Chair, Redondo Beach City Council Member, Christian Horvath, to ask the first question.
Okay, good morning. Thank you both for being here. Let me just follow up on some of the comments that were made in your opening statements. There was some discussion by Congressmember Waters related to additional funding for Section 8, affordable housing, additional monies for Cdbg. In terms of the Cdbg monies, is that separate from the Section 8 housing? And as part of this, there's been a downward trend for many years in the monies coming from HUD through Cdbg for Section 8 programs. Are you thinking that maybe that we're going to change that trend and finally start going back up so that we can really, to your point, help the many people who are just waiting on those lists? That's part one of the question. And then the second part is regarding affordable housing. Does that also include permanent supportive housing as it relates to our homeless efforts?
Thank you very much for those questions. We have put an additional amount of money, as I am remembering, about $8 billion into Cdbg. You have flexibility with that money in your cities, and all of the mayors and the city council members across this country really appreciate Cdbg because they have an opportunity to use that money in so many different ways. So I'm thinking about that separate from Section 8. That is two different pots of money. And so we have increased Cdbg, and I hope that it's able to help you with some of the creative ways that you're thinking about dealing with homelessness in your city. Again, Cdbg is very important, and we have support from both sides of the aisle for Cdbg. In addition to that, when I talk about the National Housing Trust Fund, I'm talking about the development of permanent housing, affordable housing. And I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to have put this into my legislation, because we worked very hard years ago, several years ago, when Barney Frank was the chair of that committee. And we were able to get a designation, a place in the budget for affordable housing that was supposed to have been funded in several ways. And it never really got done. But this time I have targeted $36 billion for affordable housing because of the Housing Trust Fund. And that's why I'm fighting so hard. When we talk about homelessness, we got to have some place to put people, and they've got to have not only the units to live in, but supportive services to go along with it. Californians voted for 2 measures on the ballot. One where the city of Los Angeles was very involved in supposedly developing additional units. But LA County was very much involved in making sure that there were services available to those who got those units. Because as you know, what we haven't discussed thoroughly enough is the fact that we have many people on the street who really do need mental health services. And if we get these units, and we are building units, and we're able to get them housed, we've got to have the supportive services to go along to make sure they get to the doctor, that the place is clean, and that they're safe and secure and all of that. And so we're mindful of all of these issues, but yes, additional housing must be developed. Affordable housing must be developed. And that's what that $36 billion that I put in for the National Housing Trust Fund is for. Thank you.
Congressmember Liu, do you want to address that quickly, the question?
I just want to add that this is on top of the funding in the American Rescue Plan, where we put in funding for local government, including cities, school districts, and states. And you may have seen the debate on Capitol Hill where Mitch McConnell, and I'm not even, I don't mean to be partisan, I'm just stating a fact. Every Republican voted no on the American Rescue Plan. One of the reasons was they were against the funding to local governments. So we did get that through though with the American Rescue Plan, got a similar amount of local funding out there, and we're trying to get even more funding to local governments in the Build Back Better bill.
It's terrific. Thank you both. We have time for one more question, and I'm just going to go right to the last one here. Where do each of you stand on the proposed LAX airfield and terminal modernization project?
Well, let me just say that a vote was taken 2 days ago by LAWA, and I think they basically answered the question. Let me just refer to my notes about what happened. One of the issues, of course, as you have mentioned, is Los Angeles International Airport, which is an important economic engine and a job creator for Southern California region, which we respect, but it's also responsible for a significant amount of noise, air pollution, and traffic congestion for everyone who lives nearby. I've always been committed to balancing the needs of the airport with the needs of surrounding communities like the South Bay cities. I was pleased when the Los Angeles World Airports agreed to modernize the airport without expanding it. But I was disappointed to learn that LAWA's proposed airfield and terminal modernization project called the ATMP would result in the addition of up to 12 new gates. So last month I did write a letter to the Board of Airport Commissioners expressing my concern that adding additional gates would facilitate an increase in airport capacity with corresponding impacts on the surrounding communities. The LAWA officials insisted that the ATMP is modernization and not an expansion, and that they consulted, they said, with local stakeholders as they developed the plan. And so when I started to ask about what local stakeholders did they consult with, and they started to name some of the people, I didn't hear anything from parts of the South Bay and Torrance in particular. And so while, of course, they were moving forward with putting this vote up before I was able to absolutely identify who the stakeholders were that told them that they would support the gate expansion. They have voted to go ahead and do that. But I think the real issue now that I'm concerned about is, as you know, homelessness is such a terrible problem. And there's so much land that's owned by LAWA. And there are some proposals that try and identify some of that land for temporary housing, what they would call small houses. And so I'm working with the FAA and with City Council of LA and with LAWA to find out if this is a feasible plan by which to do that. So on two issues, one, they've already voted to expand the gates, and I think that's going to happen. And two, we're looking at what we could do to utilize appropriate land owned by LAWA to have temporary housing to get rid of the homelessness that bother so much our residential communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressmember. Congressmember Liu, do you have a response to that?
I think Chairman Waters captured it very well.
Very good. Well, thank you both so much for being here and taking the time to address us and answer some questions. We appreciate you and the work that you're doing so very much. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to move along in our agenda here. We have representatives from Senator Dianne Feinstein office. Jeanette Christian is here. I think we have a couple, 2 or 3 minutes for an update from you.
Thanks. I wasn't sure the format. I know it changed a little bit. So thanks for having me. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Jackie, for your leadership. Jeanette Christian with Senator Feinstein's office. A few quick things to cover that our wonderful two Congress people already covered, but the Senate just passed a short-term debt limit increase to avoid U.S. defaulting on its loans last week. So we will be able to operate until at least December 3rd. And from now till then, we'll be working on making sure we have another continuing resolution or hopefully passing a few appropriation bills. So the Senate is now in recess until next week on Monday. So when we return, the Senate returns, we expect to be doing a lot of things. Judge confirmations, there'll be some procedural votes on 2 voting right bills. As you know, we've been working really hard to get these voting right bills to the floor and a vote, but I'm not quite sure they'll be going through. So keep your eyes open. I do think, I know a lot of people are really concerned about the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. So we'll be trying to push that through the Senate. There's a lot of questions, I think a lot of answers on the infrastructure bill. There is movement. I do believe that we won't see anything until late October or early November as negotiations continue. But as you know, the Senate, so the Senator already voted on the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which had the top line number of 3.5 trillion. As you probably read in the papers, it's been negotiated a few different times. And right now, I think everyone's landing around 2 trillion. But we'll see as the weeks continue and as negotiations continue where that bill ends up. Some of the provisions in the bill that we've talked about before, education, like childcare, universal pre-K, tuition-free community college, healthcare expansion, tax credits, and a lot to address climate change, electric vehicles, solar and wind incentives, clean energy standards. So I know that was one of the questions of what's going to be included. And I think in the next few weeks, we'll see it as once we finally get something on paper of what actually goes through. But right now we voted for the entire bill. So we hope to see all these programs fully funded. Quickly, I think Congressman Liu touched on this, but on October 1st, I think it affects some of, I think the South Bay would be interested. There was obviously an oil pipeline spill and leakage about, the number has changed a few times, but I was able to go up with the U.S. Coast Guard last week and take a look at some of the impacts in Huntington Beach. But I know right now it's all flowing south and it's coming up to the shores. Right now, anchor strike remains the most likely cause of the rupture, but there's a big investigation. I don't think we'll have a full answer for a few months as the investigation continues. But we've led 2 letters on the oil spill. So first, we urged Leader Schumer and the Energy and Natural Resources Chair Manchin to include our bill to ban all oil and gas drilling off the West Coast. And this would be in the Infrastructure Reconciliation Bill. And secondly, we called on the Department of Transportation to conduct an investigation of the spill and identify prevention steps. So that's kind of a quick update on what's going on. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Jeanette. Appreciate that. We also have on Lauren Gallant with Senator Padilla's office. A couple minutes for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm honored to be here. I am Lauren. I am Senior Field Representative for Senator Padilla. And just a brief background, I am headquartered in LA County for the Senator, but I cover 5 counties for him. I am covering LA County, Ventura, Santa Barbara, Orange County, and San Bernardino, but just really pleased to be here with you all. Previously worked for him as his Deputy Secretary of State for Outreach, and had the opportunity to work with the South Bay community when I managed government relations for Memorial Care. So really looking forward to working with you all in the months ahead. Just a brief high-level overview today of, I'll just mention the senator's committees. He sits on the following committees. He sits on Budget, Environment and Public Works, Homeland Security and Government Affairs, Judiciary Committee, Rules, and finally, he's the chairman of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, Citizenship, and Border Safety. I know, as a Congress member's mentioned, infrastructure remains a big interest, as is transportation. And so, as we discussed with the bill, the region would receive billions of dollars from the bipartisan infrastructure bill to upgrade transportation infrastructure. But just to highlight a few items of that, the bill would increase funding specifically for the Capital Investment Grant Program. And this is slated to provide hundreds of millions of dollars for the construction of the Inglewood Transit Connector Project. The bill would also include $17 billion to upgrade our nation's ports and waterways. And finally, we'd also provide an estimated $388 million for LAX and $1.5 million each for the Hawthorne and Torrance airports. So I just wanted to mention that. Climate change remains a top priority for the senator. Just want to mention that he's working with his colleagues to craft a reconciliation package that would provide historic investments to address climate change and environmental justice. Want to highlight a specific bill for everyone here, and this is his Clean Commute for Kids Act of 2021. This was introduced back in the springtime, and specifically, the Clean Commute for Kids Act would authorize $25 billion over the next 10 years for the EPA, with the assistance from the Department of Energy, to provide grants to replace existing buses with clean, zero-emission buses. And the senator looks at this as an issue, obviously, for the environment, but also a public health and environmental justice issue as well. So I just wanted to highlight that for everybody here. So as Jeanette mentioned, the Orange County oil spill remains a top concern. As I mentioned, I cover Orange County for the senator, and we led a briefing and a flyover of the oil spill area in Orange County this past Monday. We had staff there from Senator Feinstein's office joining us, which was terrific. And as Jeanette mentioned, our offices are working closely together on this, with Senator Feinstein, Senator Padilla, both introducing the West Coast Ocean Protection Act, and that would prohibit new oil and gas drilling off the West Coast, and also urging the U.S. Department of Transportation to conduct their own investigation, which they are now doing. And then other than that, just wanted to mention a few other items here in terms of helping businesses in the South Bay. Senator Padilla, after he was sworn in January, he was very proud that one of his first votes in the Senate was for the American Rescue Plan, which delivered tens of billions of dollars in small business relief. And also, too, Senator Padilla is working with his colleagues on the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee to develop a comprehensive aid package that would extend additional assistance to help our nation's small businesses and entrepreneurs weather this challenging period. And I think the final item I just wanted to mention for everybody is that, of course, public health remains a top concern, and the pandemic and recovery. And so Senator has really been encouraging our communities in terms of vaccinations and working with communities in addressing vaccine hesitancy, but introduced 2 bills I just wanted to mention. One, he's a co-sponsor of the COVID-19 Mental Health Research Act. And specifically, this would support research at the NIH, or National Institute of Mental Health, that studies the impact of the pandemic on the mental health of specific populations. And this is including children, women, older adults, individuals with disabilities, and members of racial and ethnic minority groups. Mental health remains a significant priority for him. And then secondly, telehealth. as we all know, with COVID and the pandemic and everyone being limited in terms of where we can go and what we can do, telehealth has emerged as being even more important than it was before. So he co-sponsored the Connect for Health Act, and this would expand coverage of telehealth services through Medicare and make COVID telehealth flexibilities permanent, and ideally with the goal of improving health outcomes and access to care. So that's just an overview of what the senator's working on. Just thrilled to be here with everyone. I'm going to leave my email address in the chat, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. Really appreciate that update from Senator Padilla's office. And I'm going to quickly toss it over to Patricia Camacho with Congressmember Barragan's office, noting that we literally have, unfortunately, like a 60-second slot for your update. I just got an update that Senator Kamlager has a hard stop at 10, and we really want to also hear from her as well. You have the floor, Patricia.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Jackie. This is my first time providing remarks on behalf of our office, but I'm happy to be here. Just real quick, I know there's conversations on expanding hours for the ports, for Long Beach Port and LA Port. So there's conversation on expanding it to 24/7. We are in communication with the LA and Long Beach ports, so we're monitoring the situation. Also, just a quick update on Social Security. The benefits are being increased 5.9%, and beneficiaries will be receiving $92. That's an estimated amount. Another thing that's happening in our district, it's the odor that's occurring in Carson. This has become a public nuisance, and the County Department of Public Works and Public Health are monitoring the situation. So we are also updating and informing the Councilman's constituents in that area of Carson and West Carson and in Torrance and any other communities that are being affected. We're constantly updating our social media. Another current event that's happening in our district, the Councilwoman is hosting her jobs fair event, annual jobs fair tomorrow in the city of Linwood. We have over 1,000 jobs available. These employers are ready to hire. And so we're looking forward to a good turnaround. But thank you very much, Stacy and Jackie.
Thank you, Patricia,
and everyone
for
else.
that update and for being concise. We appreciate that so very much. Thank you to you, Lauren and Jeanette, for your updates. I'm going to go ahead and move right along to our next panel, but I am going to toss it first to Senator Kamlager to give her update. We have 5 minutes allotted for you.
Well, thank you so much. So good to see everyone, especially great to see Stacy, who I love and had the opportunity to give a shout out to at the ICA event a couple of weeks ago for the incoming president, Yoran, who's from Culver City, which I represent right now. So grateful that session is over so that we have time to breathe and prepare for 2022. I will say that the end of this legislative session was relatively anticlimactic, probably because everyone was limited to no more than 12 bills. And so maybe that will be something that continues so that we can focus on the most important of the important issues. It gives us time to breathe in committees. It allows for more time for discussion and negotiation, for compromise, and to make sure that we are getting things right when they're ultimately coming to us before the floor. I think I had a relatively successful year. We got 118 passed and signed into law. That's the Crisis Act, which would fund community-based organizations partnering with local jurisdictions to respond to certain 911 calls so that law enforcement doesn't have to. So that comes with $10 million. And there is also an opportunity to apply for additional federal funds should they be allocated to states to apply to draw down on to also help to manage some of these programs. So it's a 3-year pilot program, and community-based organizations can apply for up to $250,000. In order to apply, you have to be partnering with a department or a local jurisdiction, a city, a county, a water district, et cetera, because we want to make sure that there are accountability measures. And we know that there are a number of community-based organizations already doing this kind of work. So instead of recreating the wheel, this is an opportunity for the state to help invest in some of those projects that are also happening. I should state that the intention behind it is not to, have a community group respond to all of certain kinds of 911 calls in the entire city of Torrance. It may be sort of locking in on a particular community, if it's the disability community, or a certain number of blocks or streets where there are high incidents of, like substance abuse calls, poverty calls, DV calls, et cetera. So the goal is not to create sort of a panacea of responses, but to really sort of allow jurisdictions to hone in on the places and the spaces where they can utilize other services so that their law enforcement are able to be freed up to do, other things. 369 was our street medicine bill, which got vetoed this year. So really disappointed about that. The veto message said that CalAIM is coming online. So we're going to hope to see that the elements of 369 are incorporated into the implementation for CalAIM, which essentially is a new program by the state to allow us to help hard to reach populations access healthcare. But it is new. And so we don't know we don't know anything. So depending on what happens with that, we may be reintroducing it again next year. AB 962 also got passed and signed into law by the governor, which is a glass reusable program, very similar to what's happening in Oregon now, where instead of taking used bottles back to the recycling center to get crushed, we'll now sort of have a program where glass bottles are manufactured with extended lifespans, up to 25, up to 30 washes. So if you go to your local brewery or liquor store or craft distillery and you buy your bottles of wine or maybe even your bottles of beer, after you drink all of those libations, instead of taking it to the recycling center to crush, you can take it to the recycling center where it will be washed and sanitized and then given back to the distributor to be filled again. So we're trying to get more into the reusable space rather than, in addition to the compostables, it's creating more sort of engagement in the circular economy. It will probably help with business models for folks that are involved in the recycling industry. And we're trying to do all that we can to sort of help businesses and also save the planet. SB 679, which was on your monitor list, got stalled in the assembly, and that's the bill that would create the LA Regional Housing Authority Trust Fund. This is the second year of a 2-year cycle, so we will be trying to figure out how to bring it back in January. We got a lot of good press from the LA Times and from other news outlets, and really did try to work with all of the local cities, the smaller cities, to make sure that they feel included. So definitely willing to continue to talk with folks to figure out how we can make this work so that it can work for everyone. I did notice in your questions, you asked a lot about housing. I'm going to punt them all to Senator Allen and let him talk about SB 9 and 10. But I maintain that we have to find other ways to finance the construction of affordable housing in ways that work for the cities where the housing is going to be constructed. One size fits all doesn't work, doesn't make sense. And we certainly can't give all of the booty to either LA City or even the county without taking into consideration the unique needs of cities and how to, construct housing that makes sense, that's in line with the urban planning visions that are in these cities, but doesn't sort of penalize cities for not building when we know it's really hard for little cities to finance the construction. And we know that's been the case as a result of the demise of the redevelopment agency. So I know that I also have to go. I can certainly, Ben has the answers to all questions. We will probably be doing more housing bills next year. I know that on the Assembly side, they have convened a housing tour where they are going up and down the state and convening these listening tours to talk about housing. So I suspect that you can expect to see more housing bills next year coming out of the Assembly. I would just encourage you all to share your thoughts, your frustrations, your considerations with the members that represent you, so that those can be elevated to our LA County delegation. We are actually having a policy retreat at the end of this year. Housing and homelessness was a priority for us this legislative session. But it's really important to elevate the distinctions, the nuances, and the issues so that as an LA County body, we can kind of fight against some things that you all are seeing, that we are seeing, that we know are not necessarily going to be advantageous to our region. And one way that we're trying to sort of fight back is to be proactive from a regional space. I think that's it for me. But definitely climate change is real and policing continues to need to be discussed. We always need more money. Local control is important. More money came to schools this year for funding because of COVID, and I suspect more will be coming down the pike. Homelessness, the governor put a ton of money into fixing it, but now we still have to talk about accountability measures and the tension between how you require something, the shall and the may, and the frustrations of our constituents.
Thank you, Senator Kamlager. Appreciate you so much, and personal congratulations on the hard work that you put into making sure the Crisis Act move forward. That will be a benefit to all of our communities, and really looking forward to seeing how we can implement that in each of our cities and seeing the difference that makes. And also looking forward to hearing more about the Housing Trust Bill, so we can maybe move from a watch to a support. So looking forward to future conversations on that. Thank you for being here and all the hard work you're doing.
So Charles had a question. I don't know if it was for me or not.
Charles?
He's like, no, it's for Ben.
Oh.
I'm joking, but he left.
Sorry.
There we go.
I think that was a mistake. Sorry.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here, Charles. All right. Thanks, Senator Kamlager. We're going to go next to Senator Allen. You're up.
All right, there we are. Unmute myself. Well, first of all, good morning. Can you hear me, Stacy?
We
okay,
can.
Great.
Yes.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. And I'm wearing my
exactly.
Dodgers shirt here today. So big night tonight, and obviously we're all hoping for the boys in blue. It's one of the many. This is a funny little segue, but I obviously all of us go up to Sacramento and we're just surrounded by Giants fans. And I know I don't even mean to make a joke. There's a funny part about it, but it really does also reflect the fact that there's a disadvantage to our region that the capital's in Northern California. And I think one of the challenges we're always struggling with, and I think Sydney's done a great job of finally galvanizing our LA delegation and getting us organized and more fierce advocate for the region. Because the whole place is run by Northern Californians, and one of our constant challenges involves educating the capital community about the unique needs and feel and issues that face Southern California. And I'm just reminded of it when you walk around the Capitol and you see all this Giants gear on everybody. Anyway, so hopefully we'll put them to shame tonight. I just wanted to let me just build upon a couple of the things that Sydney has been talking about. I mean, first of all, but before I do that, I just want to give a special shout out to my staff. A number of my staffers are on the call. All of our staffs have been working so hard. I know our call line, our district office number has been just flooded with calls and emails asking for help during the pandemic. People who had challenges with unemployment, small business support, residential and commercial rental issues, inquiries about trying to navigate the madness of the state bureaucracy. And I think we were just counting it up. We were able to resolve, our little small team, just our team alone was able to resolve, I think, more than 3,000 individuals and business owners cases in our district. And we're actively assisting nearly 600 more right now. So they've been working hard. And I think most of you know this, but those of you who are in our district, please do continue to reach out to us. We really do stand ready and willing and interested in trying to help regular folks deal with all the challenges that have come at them over the last couple of years. So as Sydney mentioned, we just wrapped up our legislative session. A lot of the work focused on addressing the immediate needs of the public during the pandemic, small business supports. There was about $2.1 billion in grants and tax cuts. There was a program to allow folks to deduct expenses covered by the federal Paycheck Protection Plan. We obviously, we did a big tax cut to small business, something like $6.2 billion tax cut under AB 80 for small business. And then of course, all of the budgetary things that Sydney was talking about, billions more in pandemic relief and support for small businesses and nonprofit organizations, a rainy day reserve of more than 25 billion, substantial investments in education and health and social services infrastructure. Some of that money, obviously, you're going to be seeing. Speaking of education, we worked with schools to provide support for remote and in-person instruction. We support, we were able to get record amounts of funding for people spending for public education. We created a first in the nation free lunch program for public school students, expanded broadband access. I do know that there continue to be challenges, especially for a lot of the districts in our area. I was just meeting with leaders from Manhattan Beach Unified, Hermosa Beach Elementary School District, and also Palos Verdes District just yesterday. In fact, I was down the South Bay meeting with education leaders. And one of the things I want to work on with them and with AXA and with the School Boards Association is a bill to extend the safe harbor, basically the current rule, the current law that basically extends out the existing funding to school districts as they've been struggling with declining enrollment that has been happening as a result of the pandemic. So we have to make sure that we give them the certainty that they need to keep their doors open and keep their programs strong. We were able to help renters, mom and pop landlords, avoid eviction and foreclosure. There was stimulus relief for individuals and families who were, with regards to rent relief, a record $12 billion over the next 3 or 4 years to address homelessness. And you're certainly going to see some of that money as well. I see Christian here. We just got a chance to visit the Pallet program in Redondo. And one of the many things we want to do is make sure that this homelessness funding is going to be available for our cities in the South Bay. We were able to do some great, some local stuff. I mean, you mentioned Redondo. We were able to get funding to help to rehabilitate the King Harbor Seaside Lagoon and a number of other worthy local projects as well. So what are some of the things I was working on? We had a bill, SB 44, to expedite CEQA review for green transit projects that will almost certainly help speed up the construction of the Green Line extension that we hope to get done by the Olympics, if possible. I'm going to actually be meeting with the head of Metro in the not too distant future to push her on that. We had SB 628, which was inspired in part by the New Deal era Works Progress Administration, which establishes a creative workforce development act, and it basically provide employment and job training for artists and creative sector workers through public programs, focusing on folks who may not have other opportunities to pursue careers in the arts, and also was able to do a bill, SB 664, that came out of a pretty shocking expose of abuse in the hospice system. I don't know if folks read those articles that the LA Times did. So basically, there's been a cottage industry of illegal practices that have been bilking taxpayers in our healthcare system by a lot of money. And we put in an audit request that was unanimously approved. Our bill was signed into law by the governor last week. And it's my hope that it's going to help to fix the problems highlighted by the Times expose. Similarly, I was the Senate lead on Assemblymember Cotty Norris's bill that implemented a number of the auditors' recommendations with regards to unemployment insurance fraud, particularly this issue. And unfortunately, some of the civil liberties folks you didn't want to allow our unemployment insurance people to cross-check their data with folks in the prisons. And as a result, people in prisons, a number of them took such advantage. I mean, at enormous, egregious levels. And I'm just really glad that we were able to force that bill through, get that practice changed, so that now they'll be able to cross-check in the future and prevent this type of of fraud and abuse. It really was just so outrageous. Speaking of exposés, the debate over conservatorship laws and conservatee rights was powerfully illustrated by the fictional and real life stories told by the Netflix film I Care a Lot, and also the documentary that the New York Times put together. It was dealing with the Britney Spears case, of course, but there's a lot of other issues that have come up. And I worked with Assemblymember Lowe on a bill basically to advance due process rights of conservatees by providing them with the guarantee of legal counsel. And there's actually a big piece about it, not about the Britney Spears case, but actually about another conservator case in the front page of the calendar section today of a Hollywood trainer. So we're trying to get those issues addressed. On the environmental front, I chair the Environmental Quality Committee. I'm continuing to work on climate change adaptation, natural resources protection. Sydney and I were big supporters of Al's AB 1395 that unfortunately did not get across the finish line. That would have been a really, really meaningful climate bill. We're hoping to get that done next year. Who knows? It continues to be a really tough one. We were able to get a couple areas of success. One of them, SB 433, which was just signed into law last week. It builds on the California Coastal Commission's proven success with handling access violations, and it provides clear authority to the commission to issue administrative penalties for unpermitted damage to wetlands, natural habitats, or coastal waters. And now that it's been signed, it will actually provide the most meaningful recourse for the state when there are oil spills like we saw down in Orange County in federal waters. So that now the Coastal Commission will be able to go after oil companies that or other folks who are responsible for oil spills, such as the one we saw down in Orange County. And right now, there's really no recourse on the part of the state. And so I'm so excited the governor signed this bill because I think it will really help. And then I continue to work really closely with our city governments, the League of Cities, the COGs up and down the state on the issue of waste management. This is not a sexy issue, but I know all of you know that this is something that is becoming more and more of a problem for our local governments. Ever since the Chinese implemented their national sword policy, the bottom has fallen out on our recycling market. And it's you and our waste haulers and ultimately our ratepayers who end up bearing more and more of the burden of this plastic pollution crisis that we have on our hands. We've got to get a handle on it. We've got to start reducing the amount of plastic waste in the system because in the end of the day, it's only going to result in more and more rate increases for our constituents. And they're going to be asked to pay more and more, and they don't quite know why. So I've got my SB 54. It's a big bill. We're still working on it. We had a whole bunch of bills that passed this year, including Sydney's bill on bottling that she just mentioned. I got a bill through SB 343, which basically expands the existing truth in advertising law that prohibits the use of the word recyclable on unrecyclable products. The idea is if you can't say that it's recyclable on the product, you shouldn't be able to put the recycling symbol on the product. So many people were we're doing what they thought was the right thing. I was too, by the way. I was just throwing everything that had a recycling symbol, I'd put in the blue bin. Well, it turns out I was harming the system. I was making it more expensive for you and your cities to do your work. And then didn't even realize. So now, as a result of the bill, we're going to finally get some truth in advertising. I was also part of a small team of legislators who worked to secure the governor's commitment to more than $500 million in additional funding to increase fire prevention in our parched state. And this is going to focus on forest management projects such as vegetation thinning. It's going to set aside money for lower income people to fireproof their homes. And this will certainly help people down on the peninsula as well, where we've got a real fire problem. We also had a big, our climate resiliency bond ended up getting folded in to the budget after countless hours of negotiation. I'm happy to report that many aspects of the bond that we've originally proposed that I worked with many of you on, it's now so many of the line items from that bond are now contenders for more immediate state funding. So it thus eliminates the need for a ballot measure that would require voter approval for more borrowing, and of course, and of course the interest rates associated. So I'm really excited about that. Anyway, it continues to be a real honor to represent you in the state Senate. I'm going to continue to keep working with you, and just so great to see so many friends. I'm looking forward to seeing more and more of you in person. I see Stacy here. We worked together on a trust fund bill on housing. I know we're going to be talking about housing later on. Unfortunately, that ran into a terrible brick wall. It was a very frustrating experience, I think, for everybody involved. Sydney's bill, I think, offers an interesting path as we try to come up with tools that we want to give to local governments to meet these ever increasing housing requirements that have been coming down from HCD. So that's a whole nother conversation that I'm happy to engage in. Anyway, good to see everybody, and go Dodgers.
Thank you, Senator Allen, for that update. Hopefully you can stick around. We have some Q&A. Awesome. Wonderful. I'm going to quickly toss it over to Assembly Member Burke for her update. We have about 5 minutes for your update. Thank you for being here.
Morning. I thought Al was going to go before me, so I was kind of just hanging out and listening. But thank you guys for having me. It's good to see everybody. I can't wait till we're back doing these things in person again. But for now, it's good to see all of your faces. This year was obviously it's been a tough year for everybody, but even with the challenges we've all faced during this pandemic, I'm really proud. Team Burke actually got a lot accomplished, both legislatively and through the budget. I also want to point out that my team this year, I have members of my team on here. They are a hardworking bunch, and to prove it, we had no bills vetoed this year. And I think we were batting about 90% of our budget requests, and the things we pushed for came through as well. So I'm really proud of that. They're there to support you guys and have been an incredible support to the legislation that will not only benefit the 62nd district, but the state as well. So I'm going to run through some of our successes. I know I have 5 minutes. I'm going to keep an eye on the time. AB 80, which was the Coronavirus Relief Act, which Ben had mentioned. It is the largest single tax break for business in California history. I am a proud author of that, and it was one of our original bills. Under the newly enacted legislation, forgiving the Paycheck Protection Program loans that business received from the federal government during the pandemic and will not be counted as taxable income. Obviously, really important to our businesses, both in our district and throughout the state. We also did AB 1203, which expanded the universe of eligible applicants for the service on the LA County Tax Assessment Appeals Board in order to address an unprecedented backlog in appeals that was expected to grow as a result of COVID-19. The number actually of new hearings grew by 44%. So this law will allow taxpayers to have the opportunity to adjust disagreements over assessments on their properties, which is also going to be a really important support for businesses and others. AB 680, the California Jobs Act plan, will ensure that projects continually funded out of the state greenhouse gas reduction fund use fair and reasonable employment standards to promote high quality jobs, inclusive procurement policies, and prevailing wage for construction policies. These provisions are just a few of the proposed California Workforce Development Board's High Road report. And this will put the principles of equity on the front end of the application process rather than as an afterthought, which has been a concern for myself and those in our district. It's really important that we are thought of first. So AB 1261 codifies recommendations by the state auditor requiring Air Resources Board to establish specific process to assist the state in achieving its greenhouse gas emission goals. CARB would be required to use this information to refine greenhouse gas emission estimates in its annual reports to the legislature, its funding plan, and any long-term planning documents or reports. I think this will help people be able to plan a little bit better and businesses be able to plan better. SB 144, which I co-authored with my colleague, Senator Anthony Portantino and Assembly Member Wendy Carrillo, adds $90 million annually to the state's $330 million film tax credit program. It also created a $150 million fund designed to encourage the development of new and renovated sound stages. And we're hoping that this obviously brings a lot of that business back to our district. My family, well, my daughter's father is IATSE, and obviously we know that they've gone through their challenges, but there are a lot of people in our district that work for the entertainment industry, and we want to make sure that it is a diverse industry, and that was a very important step in that direction. And finally, AB 1407, which required nursing programs to include training on ways to eliminate implicit bias. With obviously Black and Brown communities have struggled the hardest during the COVID pandemic, and implicit bias is, we want to make sure our nurses and our medical staff are looking at all of us through the same eyes and providing the same treatment for everybody. So those are the legislation, but also we did $369 million for transformative climate communities. I thank Senator Allen for helping support me in that. It's, you know, this is really an opportunity for local government to participate and local communities to participate in our climate change goals in a way that is focused on the community and what each individual community truly needs and what the participants and the people of those communities need. I did that. I think it was one of the first bills I did in the legislature, and it continues to be incredibly important to me and our surrounding communities. So really, really grateful for the senator's support on that. We did $490 million for full day kindergarten facilities grant program. I'm on the state allocation board. I have seen what this money means to these facilities and to these areas, whether they are our areas that are challenged and have not had the ability to rehabilitate, or some of the communities in the state that have caught on fire and need to rebuild their entire school systems. And really, obviously, at this point, school is one of the most stable places we have for our children. So it's important that this money is available. We did $5 million for the California Procurement Review Program that was created by my 1083 in 2019. This makes sure that any legislation that is passed, actually we'll know what effect that legislation will have on the rates, because the study will be done in advance. And I think that's really important for our community members, that we know when we do legislation what effect that will have on the individual ratepayer. We also did $8.5 million for Inglewood Market Street improvements. This was a collaborative effort with Senator Bradford. I don't know if he's gotten on here yet, but if he is, thank you, Senator. And $2 million for Lawndale Street improvement projects, and $4 million for a Lawndale Teen Center. So with that, I also want to mention really quickly, one of the great things about all of our colleagues, those who are still on the phone and those who have already gotten off, Sydney and Ben and Al and Bradford, is it's really great that we all have had the opportunity to support each other. We are co-authors of each other's bills. We are principal co-authors. We champion them in each other's houses. I think that's really unique of our area. I don't know that I've seen that in a lot of other areas, and it just goes to show that that when we all work together, there's a lot we can really accomplish. So with that, I just like to say it's good to see everybody again. Thank you for your continued partnership. It's always good to see everyone, and I look forward to our continued collaboration in 2022, and God willing, seeing everybody in person. I miss hugs. I miss seeing people. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Assemblymember Burke, for being here, and hopefully you can stick around for a few more minutes as well for Q&A. But thank you for that update. I see that Senator Bradford's here. While you get yourself organized and online here, I'm going to toss it over to Assemblymember Marisucci for your update. Good morning.
I'm online, so I'm online, ready to go.
Okay. Assemblymember Marisucci, do you want to hang tight, and we'll let Senator Bradford go, and we'll save you for last on the updates.
All right, sure.
Okay.
Thank you, and I appreciate this. Thank you, and I appreciate this invitation to join COG. It's something that I've been involved in for 20 years, ever since I was a local elected official in the city of Gardena. And just want to highlight the legislative year. As many of my colleagues stated, we've had a very successful year collectively and individually with the number of measures that we were able to move through the House and get a governor's signature on. Also, I was able to serve on the task force, Economic Recovery Senate Task Force, as a co-chair with Senator, and working on a landlord and renter protection, which was vitally important to all of us here in California during this pandemic. But I want to just quickly highlight measures that I authored and was able to get a governor's signature based on much of the conversation and the media coverage. It was a very successful year for not only me, but again, for the state of California. But I want to start with SB2, better known as the Kenneth Jr. Police Decertification Act. It allows California now to join the 46 other states that have a fair and transparent way of decertifying and get rid of bad cops. It shouldn't be easier to get rid of a doctor, a lawyer, or even a beautician for giving you a bad perm, but than it is to get rid of a cop that's committed a crime. SB2, again, was named after Kenneth Ross Jr., a young African-American man that was killed in 1918 by a police officer who had transferred from Orange County after being involved in 3 questionable shootings there. And this will end what we've called, or I call, the wash, rinse, and repeat cycle that allows an officer to move from one department to another without any consequences. And this should be vitally important to the city of Torrance, because last year, the city of Torrance fired 2 police officers for rogue activity, racist activity, abusive activity. And you want to know what? They're working today in another department. Had this bill been in place, they wouldn't have been able to join. So I say if those officers weren't good enough for the city of Torrance, they shouldn't be able to move to another city. So this will prevent, again, the wash, rinse, and repeat cycle, and provide a transparent, fair way to get rid of bad cops, because all of us want safe policing. We want quality policing, and this is what SB 2 will afford us. Next is SB 796, a bill that has great impact and implications for the South Bay. It's better known as the Bruce Beach Initiative, that allows us to now return the property of Willa and Charles Bruce. And I'm sad to report that despite many folks growing up in the South Bay and even in the city of Manhattan Beach, very few knew that African Americans owned this property in 1912, and it was stolen from them in 1929 by the city of Manhattan Beach. This bill now allows the county, who is now the holder of this property, to return the property to the heirs of Willa and Charles Bruce, an African American couple who opened up a beach house right there in Manhattan Beach that was successful for over 12 years, until the racist activity of the Ku Klux Klan and the city of Manhattan Beach forced them off their land under the guise of eminent domain on building a park that was never built until 30 plus years later. So we all should celebrate that. And as a member of the California Task Force, the first in the nation, it demonstrates what not reparations can look like, but atonement and restitution can look like, because what happened to the Bruces is not unique at all to many families of color throughout the state of California and across this nation. Next, I want to talk about SB 567, which is determinate sentencing reform, which now allows and requires the court for criminal sentencing to proceedings to only impose the upper and maximum sentence if significant evidence is presented. As we know, again, race plays a major part in who gets these maximum sentences. So this bill now will allow a bifurcated process where that information can only be brought to court, facts bear, find it worthy to be part of the trial, and not just use it as to say someone was a member of the gang and had no proof. So now you will have to prove such allegations before you can impose the maximum sentencing on an individual. Next is SB 586, which is criminal administrative fees. Many times we know many individuals go to court and are assessed fees that they can't afford to pay, such as court costs and things of that nature. Failure to appear. And again, if an individual cannot pay a traffic ticket, he or she surely can't afford those additional tacked on fees. So this will eliminate many of those unnecessary fees that just burden, again, the working poor and just further lead them into spiraling into debt. So it was a well-discussed measure, and these fees can be eliminated to include, but not limited to, the cost of collecting restitution, installment payments, return check, failure to appear in court, medical and dental costs, recovery, certificate of rehabilitation, and sealing of records. We will no longer charge folks for such issues like that. And the next bill is SB 655, which is the Insurance Diversity Bill. And I'm happy to join our Insurance Commissioner, Ricardo Lada, in making sure that, again, women-owned, minority-owned, disabled veterans are allowed to do business with insurance companies, to allow for contracting and procurement, to share the wealth that is available in the insurance industry. Diverse businesses have a seat at the table and are afforded the opportunity to do business with a billion-dollar industry. Next is SB 694, which is our utility workforce diversity. We heard the challenges of wildfires all throughout the state of California. This bill now allows us to hire and consider and then hire looking for our conservation corps, be it our urban corps or our state California Conservation Corps, and CDCR, our incarcerated individuals who put their lives on the line every day to fight forest fires, but once they're out and free, they can't get a job. So this now allows them to help with the vegetation management issue and be a part of fire crew and the hardening of our forest landscape. And again, provide employment opportunities for many of these disadvantaged individuals. And SB 26, we call this the Fair Play to Pay Act 2.0. Maybe you might know 2 years ago, I authored along with Senator Kenneth SB 206, which was, again, the Fair Play to Play Act, which allows college athletes to monetize their name, image, and likeness. Many times people thought just because you are on a scholarship, all your expenses are paid in college, and that's the farthest thing from the truth. If you're an athlete, you can't monetize, or up until this measure, you couldn't monetize your name, image, or likeness. You couldn't sign an autograph, you couldn't sell a jersey. But if you were a science major on scholarship and you developed an app, or a music major and you came up with a song, you could monetize that. So this allows them to do this. What SB 26 does is moves up our implementation date. Our bill was going to come into effect until 2023, but when we saw the nation moving forward, as well as the NC2A, and trying to subvert and get in front of much of what we had put in place, this bill now allows us to, this bill went into action on September 1. We had an emergency clause once the governor signed it, so it is now active, and it now also allows our community college students as well, student athletes, to take advantage of, again, their name, image, and likeness. As we know, many of these college athletes help generate millions, if not billions of dollars for these colleges, and many of them, even under scholarship, go to bed hungry every night. So that's pretty much the highlight of the legislation, and I'll just conclude by highlighting I was able to secure $130 million in the district, as Autumn Burke said, 8.5 for the city of 60 million for Cal State Dominguez Hills, 50 million for Charles Hughes University, probably outside of any HBCU, graduates more diverse doctors and medical professions than any other university in the nation. Another 10 million for Martin Luther King Hospital, 1.2 million for the Cheryl Green Center in Wilmington, a young lady who was killed senselessly by gang violence. Another 6 million for Alta C out in San Pedro, a very important environmental project that has been running out there. And I'm missing one other thing, but again, we're excited. We had a great year, and if time permits, I'll stay around and answer any questions.
Thank you for that update, Senator Bradford. And because we are really tight on time, and I really want y'all to stick around for just a couple questions, I'm going to toss it over right away to Assemblymember Marisucci for his update. Thank you for being patient.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I want to join Senator Allen in saying go Dodgers. As Dave Roberts said, if you have a pulse, if you're a sports fan, watch the Dodgers beat the Giants tonight. Thank you for inviting me to this annual cattle call of federal and state elected officials. Rather than going through all the bills that I've been working on this year, I want to focus on several initiatives, several bills that I work closely with many members of the South Bay Council of Cities. First and foremost, what I'm proud of this year is the $7 billion that we were able to get into the state budget for broadband. And I'm very proud that that my efforts, starting with my introducing Assembly Bill 34, the Broadband for All Bond Act, initially calling for $10 billion in investments in this infrastructure of the 21st century to close the digital divide that we saw so apparent during this pandemic, especially for our school children, as well as for those that are trying to get to work, telecommuting, that it became so clear that we need to close this digital divide. We need to make a historic investment into our statewide broadband infrastructure to meet the needs of all of our communities. I'm proud to say that I was inspired to work on especially the municipal publicly owned broadband infrastructure component of the funding And this was inspired, of course, by the South Bay Fiber Initiative. Jackie Bacharach, Redondo Beach Council Member Christian Horvath, Olivia Valentine. I mean, so many of you who worked hard on the South Bay Fiber Initiative. We were able to use that as a model and take it statewide so that we can invest in more communities, so that more communities throughout the state can have the same kind of municipal broadband infrastructure that we're working on here in the South Bay. Next, housing. I know that SB 9 was probably the one bill that I got more calls on from my constituents than anything else in the South Bay. SB 9, of course, was the bill to mandate a statewide elimination of single-family zoning under certain conditions. And I voted no. I opposed SB 9 because, you know, on the one hand, I do believe that in order to address our housing affordability crisis and the related issues of homelessness, that we need to build more housing, but not at the expense of local control. We can't just roll over our mayors, our cities, you know, our local planning commissions. I mean, I'm always talking about how I used to sit on the Torrance Planning Commission, and we spent so much time and energy and thought into, you know, not only planning for new development, but also the impacts on local infrastructure, you know, traffic, water, electricity, school enrollment. I mean, and so, you know, as someone said earlier, I mean, clearly one size does not fit all. And so I'm going to continue to fight for our cities to make sure that while we, you know, continue to address the housing crisis, we continue to increase the supply of housing so that we can make housing more affordable, you know, for our children and grandchildren, that we do it in a responsible way, a thoughtful way that allows for us to plan so that we can make it work in our respective communities. Moving on to homelessness. Several speakers before me talked about the historic investment in the budget to fight homelessness, $12 billion over the next upcoming years. And, you know, while that is significant funding, and while I just met with Redondo Beach Councilman Horvath to make sure that we have ongoing funding for projects, pilot projects in your cities, like the Redondo Beach Homeless Court, like the tiny homes that are being set up in Redondo Beach and now in Torrance. That we need to make sure that we spend we're not just shoveling money at the problem, but that we're spending the money wisely. You know, I'm working on a bill to try to prioritize the spending for all the homeless spending to be prioritized for the prefabricated interim housing, to prioritize it for the tiny homes, you know, on the basic common sense notion that, you know, right now, each unit of permanent housing, affordable housing that we're building, you know, costs in excess of $500,000. Not only that, but, you know, it takes years to build these units. While in the meantime, you know, we have over 60,000 people who are living on the streets, on our sidewalks, you know, literally dying on our streets. And so I think, you know, from a humanitarian perspective, as well as from a common sense fiscal perspective, that we need to prioritize our spending on the prefabricated interim housing, you know, as well as to continue to build more permanent supportive housing, which of course includes all of the, you know, the important mental health services, substance abuse services, the job placement services, all those programs that, you know, Redondo Beach and their pilot program is providing, and once again is providing a model for the rest of the state. Next, I want to talk about a bill that didn't get very far. I mean, I introduced it, but I couldn't even get a hearing in the Assembly Health Committee. But it's a bill that I know was important to many of our cities here in the South Bay. It was a bill to require LA County to break down their public health regulations and public health mandates related to COVID-19 on a regional basis. You know, we saw during the pandemic that clearly the pandemic was impacting different communities in different ways. You know, the Black and Brown communities, you know, were impacted the hardest by the pandemic, and it doesn't make sense that the public health regulations that are appropriate for one community, you know, would also work for other communities that have different needs, different priorities, and so. You know, so I at the behest of several of our South Bay cities, I introduced AB 1251. The bill didn't go very far because, you know, it was opposed by LA County Department of Public Health, and you know, I understand that we're you know, doing a uphill battle there. Given that we're dealing with a emergency public health crisis, and that they didn't want to have, you know, Sacramento telling them how to fight the pandemic. But you know, I just wanted to bring that up to make sure that I'm fighting for our communities. I will continue to work closely with our South Bay cities to make sure that your voices, your perspectives are heard. And I'll just leave it at there, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Assembly Member Marisucci, for your update. I am going to give us just under 10 minutes for Q&A to respect all of your time. And I'm going to toss it over to Councilmember Horvath to get us started.
Yeah, so I guess let's go to the elephant in the room that is typically here. All these housing bills have passed, right? And as somebody mentioned earlier, there's more housing bills that we're assuming are coming in the next session. So the two-part quick question. One, are there any plans at the legislative level to study the effectiveness of these policies that are being put in place, and particularly those that remove local control over land use, zoning issues, to measure the effectiveness of them, to see, you know, are they really having the desired effect? And then, you know, part two of that is, how are we considering, as cities maybe are being mandated to build out more, the potential infrastructure requirements that will need to be backfilled as a part of increased density mandates?
Well, I mean, I'll on the first question on the effectiveness, I know, so there was a bill, AB 1483, that was passed, I think it was 2019, 2 years ago. And it requires HCD to develop a comprehensive data strategy as part of its housing plan. And Governor Newsom recently indicated that the study of that data should include an analysis of the impact and effectiveness of some of these newly enacted changes to the housing laws. So we should know, I think, as early as January as to what I think that's when they're going to release their findings on the recommendation. So watch that space. So yeah, and then what the second question was about infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. You know, as we do tend to densify in certain areas, you know, there are going to be there's no funding, you know, in any of these housing bills for the necessary infrastructure, whether that be sewers, stormwater, you name it, right? So
yeah, I mean, I know one bill that's on the so there are conversations about this, and I encourage the league to really engage, because I think it's a very fair point as the legislature continues to, you know, push this agenda. There needs to be more supports for cities. I know that there's an ACA that the local government chair on the assembly side, so this is Cecilia Aguiar Curry, has a proposal to ask voters to lower the threshold for the local approval of like GO bonds and special taxes for affordable housing and public infrastructure projects that would impact what you're talking about, Christian. It's ACA 1. It would lower the threshold. So that's something to check out. But I think in terms of like a broader budgetary push, let's all circle up and see what if the league is trying to. I mean, do you know if the league's trying to put together a broader infrastructure ask next year?
I just finished chairing the TCPW committee, and we did not discuss that yet. So, but they may be in the next session.
Maybe wise. Let's talk about it.
If I could add, I just someone referred to the Assembly Housing Working Group last week. I joined the group for a tour of housing projects and as well as homeless shelters in Los Angeles. And we were joined by Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, talking about many of the projects being funded by the county's Measure H and the city of LA's Measure HHH. And, again, I was struck. I had the same impression that I had from my previous tours of homeless shelters, which is that, and as well as the permanent supportive housing, which is that, it's great, it's beautiful when, for those that, are kind of like the lottery winners that get to live in these units. But again, each one of these units, they cost at least $500,000, if not more. Whereas, when I see the tiny homes, the pallet shelters in Redondo Beach, Christian, I think you told me that they on average cost about $10,000, and you're able to put them up in a matter of months. I just don't understand why we're not prioritizing the tiny homes so that we can get people off of our streets, off of our sidewalks, rather than letting them die in our streets. Just to make sure that this is not some crazy idea from Al. I talked with Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg a couple of weeks ago. He chairs the governor's task force on homelessness, and he completely agreed. And he's trying to do the same thing too. He's trying to prioritize in the city of Sacramento, spending, building those tiny homes, those prefabricated homes up first, because he's saying the same thing. It doesn't make sense. It costs too much. It takes too much time to build the permanent supportive housing. It's not an either or issue. We need to do both. But in terms of prioritization, we need to focus on the prefab housing first.
And I just want to add real quick, the question earlier was about SB 9, and I'm here to say I voted for SB 9. And I voted for SB 9 because of the historical reasons. And many times, just like many folks in the South Bay didn't know about Bruce, that property was taken away from African-American families simply because of the racist mindset and activity. Same way with single-family zoning. Single-family zoning didn't come into play until the late 40s, early 50s, after the abolishment of restrictive covenants. And it replaced restrictive covenants, another way to trivent people of color from moving into these communities. If you look before 1940, many times you had single-family homes, a triplex right next door. Go to West LA, in some of the most prominent neighborhoods, you'll have a beautiful single-family home and a duplex or fourplex right next door, and they've lived in harmony for 90 years. So communities need to stop fearing the fact that we're changing something, because we're really reverting back to what was prior to 1950, after the elimination of restrictive covenants that prevented Black and brown people from living in some of these communities. And you can go to a community, Los Altos in Northern California. Do you know what their zoning is for single family homes? 1 house per acre. 1 house per acre. Now tell me if that's not discriminatory and a way to eliminate who lives in those neighborhoods. So that's why I voted for SB 9.
Thank you all. Thank you, Senator Bradford, for explaining your position on SB 9. That's always helpful. I am going to, we have an audience question. Council Member Stigura from Rolling Hills Estates. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. So on SB 9, and there's a question in the chat on this from the city manager of Rancho Palos Verdes, and it's my question. There are some cities on the peninsula that are classified by CAL FIRE as high fire risk areas, and there is no further infrastructure for us in the event of a wildfire peninsula-wide, because we have a 2-lane road essentially that rings the entire peninsula. There was a late amendment to SB 9 to say there would be no building if it quote unquote adversely affected public safety. But as has been pointed out by recent articles, that doesn't take care of the situation of high fire risk areas like ours. Because if you, as we do, contract with LA City for building codes, if the building codes permit hardening for fires, then you're considered buildable, whether you're in a high risk fire area or not. And just a personal story, I shopped my homeowner's insurance to try to get a better deal. And I was told by the broker, you're lucky to get what you get, because there are some insurers that are not even writing policies in our area. So I know there is an initiative going on this issue because it does disproportionately affect us. And as Senator Kamlager said, it's not a one size fits all kind of bill. It shouldn't be. So what are the legislators' thoughts on carving out areas like ours? And I know Assemblymember Moritsuchi had a bill that would have carved out these areas, but no offense, Al, it still wouldn't have given local control. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Thank you, Debbie.
Well, if I can start, yes, Debbie, I did introduce a bill to try to put a moratorium on any new housing in very high fire risk hazard zones. You know, we've heard the phrase often that the definition of insanity is to keep on doing, what is it? You keep on doing, Ben, help me out here. Anyway, I think you know what I'm trying to say.
We're doing the same thing, expecting different results.
Wait, so you know, we have communities like when I heard that the community of Paradise in Northern California was rebuilding after, you know, their town was wiped out by the wildfire. I thought, you know, we really need to address this ongoing wildfire crisis as part of the larger climate crisis before we continue to build and rebuild more housing in the very high fire risk hazard zones. But you know, I mean, just if you want to, you know, if you want to know how people are feeling in Sacramento, I mean, I think my bill was a good example. Like, you know, that was another bill that I couldn't even get a hearing on because, you know, the reaction I got was that you know, the need to build more housing outweighs, you know, in any kind of blanket moratorium on building housing in these very high fire risk zones. So, you know, it's you know, clearly the momentum, the priority is to build more housing, and so in terms of getting more infrastructure support for communities such as Palos Verdes, that is a discussion that we need to continue to have.
Yeah, I would just add, so Senator Stern had another bill that I was very involved with that also hit a brick wall that basically would have restricted new construction in very high fire risk zones. I mean, from my perspective, you know, I totally agree with Al. You know, this is not where we should be incentivizing more housing. You know, we're spending more and more resources, sending more and more of our firefighters and more of our utility costs to service people who live further and further out into wildlands. And I just think it's crazy. I just don't think we should be doing things to incentivize more building in those areas. So I'm supportive of Al's efforts. I'm supportive of Senator Stern's efforts, but unfortunately, Al's right. The attitude in the legislature of late has been housing at all costs, and I think, you know, I just think it's silly. I will say, just to kind of clarify, Debbie, if, at least with regards to SB 9, if no homes are zoned for the area, I'm sure you know this, but I just want to clarify because I there was some ambiguity in your question. If there are no homes zoned for the area, then the bill doesn't for anything to be built. But if the locals have already allowed homes in the zones, then yes, SB 9 allows more units. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for doing that. And yes, I was trying to get my question in really quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
By the way, the Stern bill was SB 55. Check it out. We'd love to get more city support for that. I think it's a good bill, and we've struggled.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Senator Bradford, did you want to address that question at all?
I would totally agree. We shouldn't be building in high fire zone areas. If you talk to the Native American brothers and sisters who are the original inhabitants of these lands, they would tell you they never set up communities in those areas. It's well documented over 200-300 years ago that they said they would never build in those areas because of the high fire risk, simply because of lightning, and that caused forest fires, and they didn't build in those communities. So all we have to do is listen to the original inhabitants of this land, and they'll tell you where we should and should not be building in California.
Well, thank you. I really want to respect all of your time. No doubt you have something at 11 o'clock. We keep getting notes from staff. So thank you so much. Thank you, Senator Allen. Thank you, Assemblymember Rasucci. Thank you, Senator Bradford, for being here. Of course, thank you to Assemblymember Burke and Senator Kamlager for joining us today. I think these opportunities are so unique to be able to talk to you in a forum like this. And I just wish we had more time. And I do wish, certainly for the next one, hopefully we can be in person. But I want to thank you all for your efforts. And also thank you to everyone that submitted questions as well for taking the time to do that. Thank you very much. I'm going to make sure we do have, I think Eileen Tovar is here from Assemblymember O'Donnell's office, and I want to give you a couple moments to be able to give an update.
Thank you so much. Are you all able to hear me?
We are.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So thank you so much for inviting us to participate in today's meeting. I just have a few legislative updates I'll share on behalf of our office. Apologies for the Assemblymember not being able to join, but he wishes you all the best. And I have some updates regarding some of the bills that we were able to get through. One of them is being AJR2, which calls upon the federal government to address the toxic DDT that was dumped off the coastline decades ago. So that was chaptered by the Secretary of State. We have another bill that is AB 1553, which basically creates the Southern Los Angeles Ocean Chemical Waste Community Oversight Council. So basically that will consist of different stakeholders and experts that will address the toxic DDT that was dumped in our waters. It's currently in the Assembly Committee on Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials, and that will be something the member will be working on in the next legislative session. And we also have AB 306, which is school, community, college districts, employee housing. So this basically will help construct projects for housing teachers and school district employees and don't have to go through the process of receiving approval from DSA. So that was signed into law. And as you all know, and as the other legislators have kind of reiterated, which is, the state passed an impressive amount of money towards helping the homelessness crisis in our state, as well as money that will go towards improving our education system. As you know, the member is the chair of the Assembly Education Committee, so he's happy with the amount of money that was passed, which will go towards after school and summer programs, special education, recovery support for special education, and teacher residency grants. So we're excited to see that money go towards great programs such as that. And also our office will be hosting a select committee hearing on the port congestion that will take place on November 3rd. And that will be around 9:30 a.m. But we will be happy to share that information to all of you. So that way, if you're interested in tuning in and hearing that hearing, we will provide that information to all of you. So that way you can have that readily available. And that is it.
Thank you, Eileen. You
You're
are
welcome.
so efficient with your updates. Thank
course.
you very much for being here and giving us that update. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I think we need to move along and open up public comment. I'll look to see if anyone is on the call to provide public comment. Please raise your hand, or if staff can let me know. Not seeing anyone jumping up and down. Oh, yes, we have Jeff from Cal Cities.
Sure, I'll just jump in real quick. Jeff Kiernan with the League of California Cities. I just wanted to sort of respond to some of the things that were brought up during the state panel. Yes, we did work with Senator Stern and Senator Meritsucci on those two very high fire hazard severity zones. And I put it in the chat, but I thought the meeting was wrapping up, so there are a couple typos in there. But yes, I was trying to get through that. Some of those bills would not have eliminated a city's need to still meet their RENA numbers, which meant that if you're only partially in a very high fire hazard severity zone, your entire RENA requirement would have had to go into that area, and did it raise some issues with regard to housing stock, even people wanting to add, rebuild after a fire or other type disaster would potentially get caught up in some of these bills. So we look forward to working on that more with the whomever is interested, certainly Assemblymember Meritsucci. We did have some significant wins. I just wanted to mention real quick with the broadband bills, AB 14 and SB 4 that expands funding for cities to help expand broadband. The Brown Act wins that we had this year that allows for meetings like this one to continue being virtual in light of the COVID emergency. SB 556, which doesn't get a lot of attention, that would have required cities to allow space for telecom equipment on their public infrastructure. That was vetoed by the governor, so we're very excited about that. And then, of course, the SB 619, which gives cities that additional flexibility to implement SB 1383, the Organic Recycling and Reduction Act. So those are just some of the big wins we had, but I just thank you for the quick moment of time to address you all today.
Terrific. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for the work that you're doing as well with the League, Cal Cities. Anyone else for public comment? Going once, going twice. All right, we will close that portion, and we have come to the end of our legislative briefing. Thank you again for everyone's attendance and participation in this meeting. We look forward to seeing you for our next legislative briefing, which will be next year on January 13th, and fingers crossed, hopefully in person. Take care, everyone.